It's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is be. This is the fourth and final video all about the be verb. Let's revisit some of the definitions. If you've watched all the three previous videos, this might be a little repetitive, but it can be good to practice these things again. So the ways we tend to use the verb be are to mean to exist, to take place or occur, or to have a particular state, quality, identity, nature, or role. As we've been talking about this week, be is an irregular verb. To make the progressive tense, we add ing, but be is very unique in that it takes three different forms in the present tense. Those forms are am, are, and is. And then in the past tense, be has two different forms, were and was. The participle form of this verb is been, B-E-E-N. This week, we've been looking at many different phrasal verbs that use this verb be. As I've noted before, this is not all the meanings for be, but I've tried to pick out ones that I think are more common for you either to hear or see when you read. And today, some of our phrasal verbs are going to be alternate meanings for phrasal verbs we discussed earlier this week. The first set of phrasal verbs that we're going to look at are be above and be over. We talked about one meaning for be above in part 1 and a second meaning or a meaning of be over in video 3. But together, an alternate meaning for both of these phrasal verbs are to mean to be more than a particular amount. So let's look at an example. The number of students in each class must not be above 20. I could use the same sentence and instead of above, say over, and it would mean the exact same thing. Another way we might use be is with be after. It means to be later than a certain time. Here it is in a sentence. It's so dark. It must be after 9 p.m. Another phrasal verb you might hear is be into, and it means to take a new interest in something. Here's an example of that. He must be into running now. Another phrasal verb that we've talked about earlier this week is be on. And the meaning we're going to look at today is to travel in a certain direction. Here's an example of that. She must be on her way to school. Another phrasal verb you might hear is be out of, and it means to lack a supply of something. Here it is in a sentence. They must be out of chicken. Finally, the last phrasal verb, and it's a repeat that we've discussed in earlier videos, is be up. And its meaning is to be wrong or unusual. Here it is in a sentence. Something must be up because the children are not usually this quiet. Today, we're going to practice using be with a particular set of modals. Modals are generally unique in English and what they try and convey. Today, we're going to look at how people make conclusions. So you might think of this as sometimes we don't know for sure something, but we might make a guess. We might make an assumption, and there are some ways for us to convey how certain we are in that conclusion. So we're going to look at a few different ways. Today might be a little different in that we're going to look at all of the affirmative sentences first and talk about what they mean. So let's start with if we're less certain. So we think, but we don't know for sure. Okay? So when we're making a conclusion, we can use may, might, or could to express that we're not so certain. So here are a couple examples of this. She may be a teacher. They might be from Iowa. I could be out of coffee. Okay, with all of these sentences, not so sure, but what I hope you're noticing here is it doesn't matter what the subject is. The modal is going to stay as it is, and then the base verb comes after that modal. So you'll see be, be in all three. If we get a little more confident in our conclusion, there are two different ways that we can express that. We can use have, to, and the base verb, or we could use have got to and a base verb. So I'm going to take those same sentences I just expressed with my lacking of certainty, and now I'm going to strengthen them. So I think I have some more evidence, I have more information. So I could say, she has to be a teacher, or I could say, she has got to be a teacher. I might say, they have to be from Iowa, or they have got to be from Iowa. Finally, you could say, I have to be out of coffee, or I have got to be out of coffee. So one thing to point out here is got to is going to sound, when it's spoken by a native speaker, I should say, it's going to sound like gotta, G-O-T-T-A. And sometimes you might see people text with that particular phrase. And they're just shortening how that particular verb sounds. So let's move, though, to more certainty. Okay? If you feel extremely confident in your conclusion, you can use the modal must and then the base verb. So I've taken, again, these same sentences, but now I am almost 100% sure that I am correct with these statements. She must be a teacher. They must be from Iowa. I must be out of coffee because I can't find any. Okay? Now let's switch to negative. And again, we're going to go from less certain to very certain. If we are not very confident with our negative conclusion, then we're going to use the modals may and might. So here are two examples. We may not be right. He might not be ready. So all we're doing is inserting not between the modal and the base verb. Okay. Now we're going to get a little more confident, a little more certain. Okay. And what you're going to notice here is now we're going to use must not. Okay. There is not a negative form of have to be or have got to be. So we're using must. We must not be right. We must not be ready. Finally, if you feel extremely confident in your negative conclusion, you're going to use the modals cannot or could not. And it's really common for native speakers to use the contraction forms here. We can't be right. We couldn't be ready. Okay. Lastly, let's look at how you might make a question to ask someone about their conclusion. To do this, it really, there's not multiple ways. So there are going to just be two ways. We're going to use could or can. Then we'll have our subject and then the base verb. So we start modal, subject, base verb. Could it be true? Can they be the new employees? Okay. So when you're not certain, but you want someone else to make the conclusion for you, that's how you would do it. Finally, today, let's take a look at some related phrases with our verb of the day. One phrase you might hear people use is to be broke. And all this means is to have no money. Here it is in a sentence. Can you lend me $10 to go to the movie? I'm completely broke. So no cash. Another phrasal verb you might hear is be a steal. And it implies something is very cheap. And one way I hear this used sometimes is in commercials where particular goods are being sold. So my example sentence feels like something I have heard in a car commercial. Okay? This car is in excellent condition with low mileage. It's a steal. Another phrase you might hear is to be a full house. And what this means is to be crowded to full capacity. And when we're thinking of a particular location, it doesn't have to be a literal house. We could be talking about a stadium. It could be a classroom. It could be a particular room in an office space. Here is an example of be a full house. I'm sorry, but you're going to have to wait for a table. It's a full house tonight. So in this example, the house is really a restaurant. And while there haven't been full houses in restaurants in a long time, hopefully we're moving in that direction. The final phrase we're going to talk about with the be verb is be a piece of cake. And it means that something is very easy. Here it is in a sentence. It was a piece of cake to assemble that bicycle. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you will try out some sentences using be in the multitude of ways we practiced it this week. Have a great day.